Let's queer up sports. Megan Rapinoe defends trans women in sports. Don't look at me like that because I'm the one covering the sports story. I do realize how funny that is.
Go team.
TERF, Martina Navratilova responds, yikes. Tennis legend Martina Navratilova appeared to react to comments from Megan Rapinoe over transgender participation in women's sports as the soccer star gets set to participate in her final World Cup later this month. Rapinoe was asked about transgender athletes in women's sports in a recent interview with Time magazine. Rapinoe said lawmakers were, quote, trying to legislate away people's full humanity, end quote, and said she would accept a transgender woman replacing a cisgender female on the U.S. national team. As the comments circulated across the internet, Navratilova chimed in with one, yikes. The 9-time Wimbledon champion has been an activist for the gay community, but has been against transgender women competing against cisgender women in sports. In March, she applauded World Athletics for adopting a policy to exclude transgender female athletes from women's competitions. She called it a step in the right direction. Rapinoe, on the other hand, was one of the 40 professional athletes to co-sign a letter to House lawmakers in April in opposition to the Protection of Girls and Women in Sports Act, arguing that the bill would exclude women and girls from getting mental and physical health benefits. I just saw Lance Armstrong on the TV. He's on a terrible reality show that I'm not going to give credit to the title, but
Good.
Look, I have my sins as well. And just out of nowhere brings up the transgender athlete conversation and his feelings about, that they should have their own leagues. And wouldn't that be wonderful? Straight or gay, I think that we need to stop speaking for the trans community. They should speak for themselves. And Martina doing this, I think, is such a letdown to her legacy of being an activist for the community and not seeing that the T is part of LGBTQ. When I was in college, we had a gay student union that then became the LGB student union. And our biggest debate of our entire time there with the organization was whether or not to add the T to that, because it made us so much more controversial. It created so many more enemies. And I was not on the right side of history in the beginning of that argument, but I am now. And I think that is an evolution that Martina needs to go through. Don't call yourself an activist and leave out the most marginalized.
Well, that's not completely fair. Like I'm not with her 100%. But I've been very vocal about this, on this show before. I've been an activist for a minute now. I still find it hard to bring these worlds together. I think that there should be a league. They should create a league specific to the trans community. I think it's hard for us to fight that fight when there is biology and science that people want to talk about and talk over, and where we still really don't know what those levels look like and where the advantages are. I think it's still too premature. And I think, why are we fighting that world when we can create our own thing? We can have our own money, create our own sources of revenue, and just like the LGBTQ plus Olympics type of thing. We don't have to stick to the norms. Women created their own leagues back then when men were doing it. Why can't we do the same? That's all I'm saying.
Well, first off, separate is never equal.
Sure.
Never, ever. In the gay games, which
women aren't playing against men, though.
But in the gay games, I'm sorry, not women. In the gay games, gays are also still allowed to play in the regular Olympics. And we can't just go back, and to your point, when you said we shouldn't speak for them, but we need to speak up for them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they are very marginalized. They're a small number. They are a subset of a subset in our community, in the American community. And if you think that conservatives and the haters aren't willing to pick us off one letter at a time, and that they're never going to come for the G and the L, but so go ahead and have at the T and the Q, you are sad and ignorant at.
But that's different. That's so different in sports.
And I also want to say, we could not ask for a better representative of our community than Megan Rapinoe. She has been around championing us for well over a decade, since she became the pink-haired standout star of the women's national team. She is amazing, and honestly, we don't deserve her. She is just great. And the last point I want to leave you with is you cannot spell Navratilova without the word rat.
Oh my God! Oh! You didn't say anything. You didn't say anything. I understand that you don't agree with her, and I understand that she's a little bit of a sellout. But we didn't make any moves. We haven't said anything really like of factual substance where you can tell me men and women are competing in today's sports.
So
like they don't.
So what I have a hard time with often on this show is facts and feelings being mixed together, right? So I understand the feeling, and the American Medical Association did come out and say that it can be harmful to transgendered people to not allow them to play as the gender that they most identify with. But that is a different issue than the fairness issue. And so in all other metrics, there are advantages. And the reason why we don't have mixed sports and we don't have mixed baseball leagues and mixed football teams is because, a fifth grader once told me boys are better than girls. And honestly, I hate to say it that way, anybody, I'm not trying to offend you, but we do know that what the stats are, and that in every sport, pretty much every
there
sport,
are biological disadvantages.
Sport, women at the top of their game, the best, do not even come close into being able to compete with men, which is why they formed their leagues in the first place. So then we have to ask ourselves, is there an advantage, even with on hormone suppressant or hormone treating, whatever? They've had the 3-year studies, and the Olympic Committee has made certain decisions that, okay, well, this amount is okay, this amount is okay. But there are other metrics in which, like height, is a big one, that there are benefits to it. And the last thing that I'll conclude with is that sports in general are not fair, right? When you get the Honduran team against the American team, and you have a population of people that are, 5'5", 5'4", and you have 6'7", 6'8", a much larger population. Yes, so if you want to start accommodating, and as Jonathan says, I feel I'm in the same place, we could probably figure out a way to bridge it, like the same way that they do in boxing with weight classes. If we can figure out a way so then it can be equitable, awesome.
I'm okay with that.
But I don't know there's no right solution on either side right now.
Trini, you raised an excellent point, and you asked a good question that we need to ask ourselves about. But I think it comes back to a question or two questions that we need to ask ourselves even before we get to that, because that really sums up how we feel and believe about our trans brothers and sisters. Do you believe that trans men are men? And do you believe that trans women are women? Because if you say yes, then you have to allow them.
That's not
fair.
fair.
How you define,
you're saying I don't
man
support my trans brothers and sisters if I don't agree that they should be in sports. That's not what I'm saying. I have trans women friends that are really close to me that I know would agree and said, yeah, there's a disadvantage there. I probably wouldn't want to play against the cis woman sports. And I'm not saying that we can't find, like what Trini's saying, like if we could find a way, I would love it. But as of right now, I just don't feel that it's fair for you to say it or word it that way, so that I'm not being supportive if I don't believe they should be in sports. It's not fair.
Here's how we're tied together. Is that if somebody is against you because you're gay, they have a problem with what you're doing based on your gender, that someone of your gender should not be doing X, Y, and Z. Gender is also the root of what is happening with trans discrimination. So yes, one is technically sexual orientation. The other is technically gender identity, but the problem, the homophobia, the transphobia, all really come from just the definition of a classic gender standard that we have the audacity, no matter which letter that you are, to step outside of. That's why these stories matter.
And that just goes to say, for instance, I'm not very athletically inclined. So for me to, I know, shocker, right? So for me to go out there and play, baseball or football or basketball, there's probably, cis straight girls that are out there that are better at it than me.
100%. 100%.
Wow, too far.
So for the fact that, if anyone wants to be able to play a sport, they should just be able to.
Yeah.
Amen.
Well, I think it depends when you're at like high school level, community level, and when you're like Olympic level. I think there's different stakes involved in scholarships to go to schools and all that kind of stuff as well. But I do want to, you said what question we should ask before all of this. Is a trans woman and a cis woman, or a trans woman.
Is a trans woman a woman? Is a trans man a man?
And since there's no, why everybody knows I hate the letters, because I don't know why we should need to put everybody in every single frickin' box and just not say that we're all unique individuals. But let's try to put a few letters and labels to it. That a trans woman, do you believe a trans woman and a cis woman have the same experience in a material way from childhood going into adulthood? Do you think there is enough of that in order to, and how are you even defining woman is? Nobody can define what a woman is. Can you tell me what a woman is?
Someone who identifies as a woman.
But that's not a definition.
Actually,
but if they identify as a woman, they should be able to play in a sport.
So if I identified as can I identify as anything else? Or is it just and that makes me that just because I identify as that?
Okay, I think what you're intimating is that people are going to start saying they're trans so that they can start. And this was a
not at all.
This was a South Park episode.
That is not what
Yeah,
I'm
but they
saying.
actually did. But they actually did. They ran a marathon as a male, and then they ran another marathon as a female, and they won both.
I don't believe that.
Those are the stories that make it look bad and that show that there is a disadvantage within these communities. And that's the part that's still like.
And we need to remember that cis women are also minorities as well. And they have their story and they have their space as well. And I think that needs to be respected. And I think that we can come together and figure out a way to bridge these two worlds together so it's fair for everybody. But we're just not there yet, unfortunately.
And I hope that we do, because I feel really bad about it. Anyway.
We are Queer News Tonight, the world's first and only live daily LGBTQ+ evening news show, brought to you from Happening Out Television Network. We operate in the same model of PBS and NPR, but for the LGBTQ+ community. We educate, inform, and entertain by supporting the 10 pillars of our LGBTQ+ community, with more than 100,000 a week watching us on Roku, Apple Television, and other channels. To keep the story going, we accept donations with 100% transparency. Stay updated and live authentically with Queer News Tonight.